Okay, chapter 12, coordination and response in humans. Okay, can robots function fully like humans in the future? So what do you think? Okay, right now we also have a lot of robots that can do some works lah, like humans. So maybe one day, why not? We just wait lah. Okay, to see whether robot can function fully like humans in the future. Okay, so we continue with the 12.1 first. Coordination and response. So 12.1.1, make a sequence and describe the components in human coordination: stimulus, receptor, integration center, effector, response. 12.1.2, identify and describe external and internal stimuli. 12.1.3, list a type of sensory receptors based on the stimuli involved: chemoreceptor, mechanoreceptor, photoreceptor, thermoreceptor, baroreceptor, nociceptor. And 12.1.4, justify the necessity to respond to external and internal stimuli. So let us proceed. Okay. Okay, 12.1, coordination and response. So this one also you have learned in Form 3, right? Okay, so organisms have the ability to detect changes in their environments and response to these changes. So this ability is called sensitivity. So we can detect the changes, what happened, maybe about the temperature at the surrounding, okay, temperature inside our body, so we can detect. Okay, and then response. What are the response? For example, if our body temperature become high, so what are our response? What will be the response of our body to make sure that we um, can return back our body temperature into the normal? Okay, 37 degrees Celsius, for example. So this is the ability. So we have the ability to detect changes and then to respond. So this ability is called sensitivity, while the change that stimulates the response is known as a stimulus. So change that stimulates. So for example, the temperature is the stimulus because it uh, um, can stimulate the response. Okay, can stimulate the response. So that's why it's known as a stimulus, or plural known as stimuli. The stimulus is divided into two types, that is external stimulus and internal stimulus. Okay, A. Stimuli from the external environment include light, sound, smell, taste, surrounding temperature, pressure, and touch. So these are known as external stimuli. Because as the external environment outside, actually outside from our body lah. Okay. So this is known as external stimuli. So stimuli from the internal environment include changes in blood osmotic pressure, changes in body temperature, and changes in blood sugar level. This one are known as internal stimuli because this one occur inside our body. Okay, we can detect only inside from inside our body lah. This one so internal and external. So external outside, internal inside. Okay, I hope you remember lah a few example of this stimulus, and then you have to know lah to differentiate between external and internal stimulus. Okay, the example, for example, sometimes in objective will be the question, then you have to identify this one is external stimulus or internal stimulus. So for this one we have just only three internal stimulus. Okay, that we are going to explain more lah later. Okay, we're going to learn more. Okay, so mammals can detect stimuli via very special sensory cells known as receptors. So we have the stimulus that can cause changes, stimulate the changes, stimulates the response. So how to detect? To detect this, we have the receptors. Receptors usually can be found in the sensory organs. So we have already learned about the sensory organs, right? We have skin, eyes, ears, tongue, and also another one is the nose. So this is an example of sensory organs that contain the receptors. They help to detect the stimulus or stimuli. So when receptors detect a stimulus such as sound, the stimulus is converted to nerve impulse. So nerve impulse is actually like an electrical signal that will be transported fast through the brain lah, especially to the brain. Okay, so nerve impulse are sent to the brain through nerve cells or neurons. So nerve cell, same with neuron. So you can use either ones lah. You want to say write nerve cell or you want to write neurons. Okay, same meanings. The brain is the integration center that translates nerve impulse and coordinates an appropriate response. So when the impulse enter the brain, so the brain will interpret, will translate. Okay, and then we'll send information. Okay, what we have to do. So this is known as coordinate and appropriate response. So we will produce appropriate response lah. So what we have to do after we detect the stimulus. Okay, for example, if you detect the bright light, so what happened to your eyes? What happened to the pupil? Will become smaller, right? So that the can protect our eyes. For example lah. Okay. So this one, response refers to the way organism reacts after detecting a stimulus. So this is response lah. So for example, our pupil will become smaller under the bright light. That is response. Okay. The part of the body that respond is called the effector. Example of effectors are muscles and glands. So muscle, usually muscle lah. For example, in the pupil we have the muscle that can make it become smaller, can make it become bigger, like that. Okay. Glands. Glands, we are going to learn more in endocrine system. Glands usually produce hormone. Okay. So, this one, figure 12.1 and figure 12.2 explain the main components and pathway involved in detecting and responding to changes in internal and external environment. So, the first one, we take a look at the external environment. Okay, main components and the pathway involved in detecting and responding to change in the external environment. So we have the stimulus from the external environment. Example, sound. So sound is the stimulus. Sound of phone ringing. So then detected by the sensory receptors in the sensory organs. So here the sensory organs is ear lah, right? So detected by the receptors. So receptors usually will be found in the sensory organs. In this case, or ears, and transform into nerve impulse. So this receptor will detect the stimulus, then will transform it into the nerve impulse. Okay, transform into the nerve impulse, and then nerve impulse are sent through the sensory neuron. So we have the name that name for the neuron that send the impulse from the receptors to the brain. That is sensory neuron. So the sensory neuron will send the impulse from the receptor to the brain or integration center. So in the integration center, the brain nerve impulse are interpreted and a response is triggered. So the brain will interpret it. Okay, what we should do? What you should do? Okay, which effector should function, for example. So after that, the impulse are sent to the motor neuron to the effector. So the impulse from the brain then will be sent to the effector through motor neurons. Okay, so the effectors then produce a response answering the telephone. So hand muscle here is a part of the effectors. So we have two types of neuron here that you must remember: sensory neuron and motor neuron. So sensory neuron will send the impulse from the receptor to the brain or to the integration center. Then from the integration center, the impulse will be sent through the motor neuron to the effector. So the name of this neuron you must remember. Okay, so this is what happened when we detect the external stimulus. External stimuli. Okay, stimulus must detect by the sensory receptors in sensory organs, transform into nerve impulse. Then nerve impulse are sent through the sensory neuron to the integration center, that is the brain. So in the brain, the nerve impulse are interpreted and response is triggered. Then the impulse will be sent back to the effector, by motor neuron. So effector will produce a respond. Okay, so this one for the uh, detecting and responding to changes in the external environment. Later I will continue with the internal stimulus or internal environment.